We're learning Tanya today. We're learning now. We've now established the definition, or we established the bar. We've established the bar in the sense that this is not going to be a superficial work. This is going to be a deep work. We've defined the difference between the tzaddik and the Beinoni, the perfect Jew and the average Jew, as internal, not external. That's what we've done so far. We've said that on the outside, they're both the same. On the outside, the ordinary Jew is just as perfect, as immaculate as the righteous Jew. What then is the difference between the perfect Jew and the average Jew? It's the inside. Well, what does that mean, the inside? And that's where we start off today with the deep dive, where we're going to start analyzing the depth of what actually goes on behind the scenes, under the surface, within each and every one of us. You know, if you're striving for happiness, you need to know who you are. But if you don't know who you are, how are you ever going to get happy? Now, we think we know who we are, but we don't. I think that our generation has managed to reach a point where we believe in God. I think that most Americans believe in God. If you don't believe in God, you're in the minority. But also, it's pretty clear that you're a fool. I'm sorry if I'm being a little dogmatic here, very dogmatic. But seriously, to believe that this world was designed by something is logical. To believe that this world was designed by nothing, it's irrational. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. You know, today we don't live in the dark ages anymore. We don't live under a rock. We see how incredible this world is. And if you actually believe that this world created itself, I'm sorry to say, but you're an idiot. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make any sense. I think sane, rational, honest human beings believe in God. Those that don't believe in God are either choosing to ignore the reality, mostly not for rational reasons, but for emotional reasons. And I encourage you to challenge me, by the way, if you disagree with what I'm saying.
I'm just thinking of someone whose basis is only science and has no
basis is only science and has no
heart for
it's incredible. Their approaches are emotional. Mm-hmm. I was talking to a scientist yesterday. She believes in God, but she said all of her friends, they look down at her and they say, I said, I'm so curious to know what your scientific friends tell you about your belief. She says, they say it's immature to believe in God. I said, exactly what I thought they would say. It's not that they came in with some rational argument. No, it was a character assassination. They effectively were saying that you are just a child if you still believe in God. Oh, you also believe in Santa Claus? Right? Oh, I'm so sorry that you still believe. You also believe in Jack and the Beanstalk, right? So that's the attitude. Right? That's the attitude. Right? It's not like they're coming with any rational argument, which you would expect from a scientist. You'd expect, give me a rational argument. I want to hear something. I'm 42 years old. I'm still waiting to hear a single rational argument. Whenever you engage an atheist, and I challenge you to this. I challenge you. I've yet to hear an atheist give me a rational explanation as to why you can't believe in God.
Why would you bother to even say it to them? You're never going to change.
Okay, whatever. Yeah, fine. I'm just saying I'm making an observation. But I think the part that our generation struggles is not the belief in God. The part that we struggle with is the belief in ourselves. To believe that we are capable of greatness. To believe that we are worthy, that we are chosen, to believe that our actions matter, that we can chart the course of human history, that's the part that I think we struggle with. God is great. Okay, fine. But me, great? You're an idiot. I don't believe that. Not for a second. I'm just nothing. And what Tanya is about to do right now is to tell us, let's introduce you to you.
If you say we feel like we're nothing, how does that meld with, your natural soul, which is ego? So ego doesn't say you're nothing.
Our natural soul, our evil inclination, is a genius. And he manipulates us just the right way. He understands, the evil inclination understands that the best way to demotivate us is by turning off the ego. Right? Is by saying, you don't matter. So you can do whatever you want anyways. That itself is the greatest manifestation of ego. To say that the result of that action is that you're separating yourself from Hashem. You're doing your own thing, which is ego. You see what a master of deception you're dealing with in your evil inclination? He doesn't come out straight up and say, oh, ego, I'm important. No, he says, no, I'm not important. Therefore, I can do my own thing. I don't have to listen to God. Therefore, you are the ultimate ego. By separating from God, you understand? Because if you become subsumed within God, that's when your ego really gets turned off. And that's what he doesn't want. You see, he doesn't worry about short-term goals. He's worried about long-term goals. Smart. Okay. Okay, so let's learn about this idea. What we're about to learn now is a stunning revolution. That inside of you is not actually one soul. There's going to be two souls. Let me give you a quick overview about where this is going to go. Okay. So in chapter 1, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the next 9 chapters. In chapter 1, the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us that we have two souls. The first one is an animal soul. We don't yet know what it is, but we know that it comes from klippa. Klippa, which is superficiality, which means that this soul judges a book by its cover. This soul worries about the lipstick and not about the pig. This soul worries about how things look and couldn't care less about if it's good for you or bad for you. This soul buys stuff because it's advertised on the big screen, regardless of whether I need it or not. This is who we are. It is our natural soul. It is our default soul. It originates in klippa. It's sourced in superficiality. We cannot help ourselves because we as human beings are superficial. Then, in chapter 2, he's going to introduce us to the second soul, to the godly soul. That soul is the polar opposite of the natural soul. Why? Because that one is not superficial. It's sourced in essence. It's sourced inside the fruit. It cares about substance, not about form. It cares about purpose, not about presentation. It cares about the important, not about the urgent.
Well, it's a piece of God, that's why.
Yeah, because it actually is God. And that God has placed that piece within us.
But the natural soul has to be a piece of God as well. Where else would it come from? Everything comes from.
Of course, a very diluted piece of God, of course. Everything in this world has a piece of God in it. The question is how covered up it is. Then in chapter 2, we're also going to talk about the fact that if all souls come from God, then how do we have higher and lower souls? Why are some souls higher than other souls? We'll talk about that in chapter 2. In chapter 3, that's right. In chapter 3, we're going to talk about what the soul actually is made up of. Then we're going to introduce the fact that it's made up of intellect and emotion, feelings, and understandings. So when people say, I feel this, I feel that, I love, I hate, I understand, I comprehend, I meditate, all of that is the soul. All that. Then we're going to learn how to meditate in chapter 3, how to use your brain. Most people don't use their brain. Most people use 60% of their brain, or 2 out of 3 faculties of the brain. But the third faculty is mostly untouched in most people. We'll learn about that. In chapter 4, we're going to learn that in addition to the soul's essence, there's the soul's garments. Both souls, each one has its own intellect and emotions. But in chapter 4, we can learn that there's only one garment in the body which the souls are fighting over. 2 souls fighting over one body. It's like a bottleneck. Each soul is fighting for expression in the garment of the body. What's the garment of the body? Thought, speech, and action. TSA, thought, speech, and action. So that's what the souls are fighting over. In chapter 5, we're going to take a bit of a tangent. We're going to talk about the greatness of Torah. Because once we're talking about how the godly soul wants to manifest in holy thought, speech, and action, and the animal soul wants to manifest in mundane thought, speech, and action, we're going to take a quick tangent in chapter 5 to talk about the incredible gift, which is Torah, how it is literally divine intimacy. But then in chapter 6, after having discussed already what the godly soul really is, in chapter 5 tells us, that the godly soul is a piece of God and it connects to God. It's purity. There's no blockages. So what is the animal soul in chapter 6? There we're going to learn that the animal soul's root, its core, its identity is ego. Ego means separation from Hashem. And that is what what drives the animal soul. It wants to stand on its own 2 feet. It wants to assert itself. It wants to identify on its own. So whenever you are faced with a choice, you have to ask yourself, if you want to know if it's the godly soul or the animal soul, you have to ask yourself, what's the end result going to be? What's the end result? For example, you're supposed to come to study Torah. And you get distracted to donate to charity. So you have to ask yourself, what's the end result? The end result, I'll be giving charity, but I won't be studying Torah. I would say that that's sourced in the animal soul, which is trying to pull you away from a godly activity. Yeah. Even though charity is also godly activity, we'll talk about it more in detail in chapter 6. Now, what's chapter 7 going to tell us? I'm doing the 9-chapter summary of where this is going. Chapter 7 is fascinating. Tells us that just like the 2 souls are fighting over the body, they're also fighting over the natural resources of this earth. Every time you drink a cup of coffee, you could either be upgrading or downgrading the cup of coffee. Why are you drinking coffee? Is it in order to settle your mind and allow you to understand the Torah? Or is it to just satiate and serve the pig within you, that just likes to eat and be gluttonous, right? You think about that. It's clear to me that you drank that coffee only because you're studying Torah. So what you're doing is that you just elevated that coffee. And just so it is with your house and your business and your vacation and everything else that you engage with. It's the human being has the power to uplift. That's the question. What's the purpose behind what you're doing? It's your kavanah, your intention, that will determine whether something will be uplifted or downgraded. Right? And this exhibits to us how man is really the fulcrum of creation. We're not just citizens of the world, a blip on the radar screen. We determine how the world goes. As we go, so goes the world. What rages on inside of you is what manifests outside of you. We are the microcosm that transforms or changes or influences what goes on in the macrocosm around us. And that's chapter 7, which is a huge,
That's
huge.
why Adam was put here to dominate the world, to be over the animals, over everything in the world. So we are.
Right, that's right. That's why Adam dominated the animals in the world. Exactly. Now, and that was, by the way, from the moment we were created. It says, be fruitful, multiply, and dominate all the details of this world. What that means is it's exactly right, Marty. What that means is that divine mandate is that we are commanded not just to live and let live. No, we're supposed to pillage, and plunder this world for godly purposes. You're supposed to take animals and turn them into shoes. You're supposed to take raw materials and turn them into beautiful jewelry and homes and buildings to use them in the service of God. Because when you do that, you're uplifting the entire supply chain of the world. Now, in chapter 8, we talk about those parts of the world that we cannot touch. There are certain no entry zones that we cannot influence, and they are those are the things which are forbidden. Something which is prohibited, if it's forbidden, it means you have no ability to elevate it. The word permissible in Hebrew, mutar, means unchained. Right? Like freeing captives is matir asurim, unchaining captives. But the word asur, prohibited, means bound or chained or locked. You can't pick it up. It's not for you to do. So what's an example of something that you can't elevate? Bacon, adultery, idolatry, murder, theft, charging interest to a fellow Jew, working on Shabbos. These are all examples of things that are chained. They're forbidden, not because God is afraid of you to go there, not because God is trying to control you, but because you have no capacity to uplift that intensity of darkness. Okay? And then in chapter 9, we in the end, the closing of Underneath the Hood, the final chapter of introduction to ourselves, there we're going to learn about the battle of two cities. The battle over the city by two kings inside the city. And this is incredible now, what's about to happen, is that the two kings are battling over the dominion over the city. It's like, Putin, Zelensky fighting for Lvov, right? For Donetsk, right? The two kings are fighting, right? Well, each one wants their own dominion. They want to control everything about the city. That's what's going on inside of you. Your godly soul is fighting with your animal soul. What does your godly soul want? That thought, speech, and action should completely manifest godly soul needs. And what does your animal soul want? And this is the kicker. Your animal soul wants that your godly soul should win.
Wants your godly soul.
Yes. That's like saying Zelensky wants to win and Putin wants Zelensky to win. What? Yeah, that's exactly what it says in Tanya, quoting from the Zohar, end of chapter 9. There it says that the great metaphor of the prostitute, of the king's prostitute, where the king wanted to test his son, to test his mettle and prove himself. So the king hired a loyal prostitute to the kingdom that would agree to attempt to seduce the prince. The king tells the seductress, try every trick in your repertoire, try everything you can. Secretly, I hope that you lose, but because I want my son to prevail and not succumb. It's a stern test. Now, what does the prostitute want? Does she want to win or lose? Outwardly, she wants to win, but inwardly, what's her true intention? She loves the king. She's hoping that she's going to lose. That's the evil inclination. Your evil inclination outwardly was hired. It's a mercenary. Hired hand. He's just doing his job. He's hired to mislead you, but he's hoping that you're going to win over him. So you got the battle of two kings over the one city. The godly soul wants to win, and the animal soul wants to lose. If you let your animal soul win, you're a fool. That's what the Tanya is telling us. And that, my friend, was the fly through the first 9 chapters of Tanya that really puts the bird's eye view for us on where we're going in the next 9 chapters. I'm sorry we don't have time to read it inside, but I thought that was a very critical flyover for us to understand where the next 9 chapters are going to be taking us. After that, we're going to talk about self-mastery. We're going to talk about 2 ways, the long way and the short way, as to how your godly soul can dominate over your animal soul. That's in chapters 10 through 25. I'm not going there yet. But for right now, we need to understand our hardware. We need to understand who we are, what we have under the bonnet, where this is going. And under the hood. I'm sorry. It must be a South African term. It is English, right?
British, though.
Oh, so it is British.
It's British.
Okay, so it's the Queen's Commonwealth. What are you arguing with me?
This is not the Commonwealth. This is America.
I am proudly African American. Okay, so
African American, one flavor.
So with that, folks, and we just see the questions coming in here. Andrew, the anti-God point is an either-or argument, either science or dogmatic religion. Their failure is not recognizing that our faith encompasses the one master of nature, science, and above nature. It's a brilliant point, Andy. The anti-God group, they believe that it's either or. It's either God or science. And what they fail to realize is that God is not in conflict with science. It's not binary. It's not science or God. Okay, I'll pick science. You give people a choice. Either you can believe in God or you can believe in science. Who said it's a choice? That's a very, very good point there, which makes a lot of sense to understanding where they're coming from. And if we can just shift that particular paradigm to explain that God created science, it's like saying it's not math or religion. Math is a part of religion. Nature is a part of belief, right? Elaine, would you say that the animal soul is the agency of free will? Absolutely not. Free will is your ability to choose between the animal soul or the godly soul. Terry, good morning. Winston, I heard someone said he is an atheist, that he hopes that God exists. Okay. So he hopes that God exists. At least he's being honest. Fine. He hopes that God exists. And to his point, Winston, he would say, you can say to this kind of a person, okay, so let's agree that it's not that God is irrational. God is unprovable. You want to say that you can't prove God in a test tube. You can't predict his behavior. Okay. But God is deductible. Is that a word? Deducible or deductible?
You can deduce God from the activity.
Right. So is that deductible or is that more a tax word? That's the taxes. Okay. You can deduct taxes, but you can deduce God. Right? And that is, whilst it might not be provable, on a table, predictable patterns of behavior because God created them, you can deduct the presence of God. Like I can deduct that Steve Jobs existed even though I never met him. Right? I can deduct that somebody created this laptop that I'm looking into right now. I can look at the world and say, I can deduct that there was an engineer to this building, even though
It's deduce.
Did I say deduct? I'm sorry, deduce. I meant to deduce. You can deduce that there's a builder to this building. Right? I can deduce that the Empire State Building had an architect. I never met him. No idea what his name is. Man, woman, don't know. Black, white, I couldn't care less. I don't know. I just know that there is an architect to the Empire State Building. So when I look at the universe, which is much greater, much more complicated than the Empire State Building, the universe, okay? And I say, oh yeah, of course, that happened by itself. Sure. Such a person is not being rational because they're not deducing the obvious inference from the proof that lies before them. Thank you, Dan. I'm glad you appreciate that. And good morning, Corey, Fran, Elaine, and Lauren, and David. Great. Okay, I'm going to call it a day here, folks. We'll continue. Wishing everybody a Chodesh Tov. It's the month of Adar, the month of joy. Remember, joy is not the product of blessing. Joy is the cause of blessing. Adar is the month of joy, of gladness, and that's why it channels free flow blessings, where we all experience the free flow of blessings. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Dan. Tadar, bye-bye.